Good evening, folks. Mike Naso here from IPR365.com with the latest on the tropics, and it's only been a couple days since I last spoken to you, and I've been busy but keeping an eye on the tropics like we all do. And with it being September and still 2 months left of a very active hurricane season, indicative too of an active late season, we were tracking depression, became Tropical Storm Igor and an invest, and then Igor weakened back down to a depression, then came back to a minimal storm, and it didn't look all that great. And in the course of just 26 hours or so, we've gone from a tropical storm to almost a Category 5 hurricane. And so this has certainly, definitely changed things in the Atlantic basin, and not for the better. You don't want to see a hurricane this strong anywhere in the Atlantic, but right now it is not impacting land. You can see the pattern this year has been persistent troughiness off the east coast that has been able to take that high pressure ridge, the ridge we always see here with that clockwise flow around it that steers hurricanes west, sometimes into the Caribbean, a la Gilbert or Dean, sometimes further to the north and towards Florida, and 1926 Hurricane Francis come to mind, and sometimes safely out to sea. And what it looks like Igor is going to eventually do is start moving west-northwest by tomorrow, and then start to make a northwest curve and more than likely eventually curve out, possibly east or west or near Bermuda, which is why Bermuda needs to watch it carefully. But it's still not out of the realm of possibility that Igor can't pull an Earl and move a little bit closer than we like, or even start to bend a little west if that troughiness flattens out a bit, as the Hurricane Center noted. But we'll talk about all that on this update, as well as Julia and 92L. Now here's the latest on Hurricane Igor as of 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Hurricane Igor was at 17.6 north, 47.8 west. Winds were 150 miles per hour. It's the strongest hurricane of the 2010 season so far. Winds gusting 185 plus. If you were in that eye wall right now, you would not survive unless you were in a solid concrete structure, and even that would have damage. But thankfully those winds are contained over water right now, moving straight to the west at 12. Don't see any indication that that's moving north at all. If anything, it's even taken a little bit of a southward dip, and that pressure, 935 millibars, still not as low as Earl, but it's getting there. It is forecast to become a Category 5 overnight briefly. It may be one right now, it may have been one a little earlier, it may be fluctuating, and stay a Category 4 or 5 hurricane, and then a major hurricane for sure by the time the week comes to the weekend and it closes out as a Category 3 Friday night here. And you can see that track, it's starting to indicate that there is potential that this trough flattens out a bit and the ridging starts to rebuild a little west, pushing Hurricane Igor clearly from moving this direction, and then a little bit, maybe a little bend to the west-northwest there, ever so slight there, from Thursday into Friday, a little bit of a left turn, but it could absolutely turn up and around again like the GFS model shows. Here's the model guidance, by the way, for Hurricane Igor. You can see the current motion, if continued, would take it straight through the northern islands, south of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, towards Jamaica. If that happened, it'd be the next Hurricane Ivan. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. You can see most of the models, however, do take it on west-northwest, then northwest, and then eventually up and out, and that does appear most likely. You can see the consensus, though, is of some kind of westward movement here 4 days out before another turn to the north occurs. Believe it or not, not too recently, but definitely in years past, we have seen a lot of hurricanes make a northward motion and then back west and then kind of loop around back north and northeast in the Atlantic. That is not really an unusual track. A lot of times they do kind of sputter near Bermuda and then end up moving again once that flow becomes out to sea. Here's the wind field with the hurricane. Again, those Category 4 winds would be right in this little white area that I drew, so the entire hurricane is getting larger. It's forecast to be a very large and powerful hurricane. However, as of right now, hurricane force winds don't even extend out all that far from the center, and it doesn't look like even tropical storm winds are going to impact any of the islands here, although looking out there, seeing a 150 mile per hour hurricane moving straight west towards you is not a good feeling, and so we're definitely going to be watching that over the next couple of days. You can see there's the last few days of Igor's evolution there at the end. A very impressive hurricane. There's Tropical Storm Julia near the Cape Verde Islands, which we'll talk about in a minute. Here's another beautiful look at this hurricane. Watch how the eye clears out throughout the evening, and it takes that little southerly dip there, expected to continue west and then eventually make that turn more west-northwest. But again, Earl was expected to move a lot further north than it ended up moving, so you can't completely be sure that a hurricane is going to move where you think it's going to move, and when it's as intense as Igor is, you don't want to deal with it. I tell you, these ice storms lately, I mean, you think about Iris and Isidore and Ivan and Isabel, yeah, Ike, we've been dealing with in the last few years, and Igor definitely has joined the ranks of Hurricane Isabel for a Category 4 or 5 hurricane. In fact, I can't remember seeing a hurricane quite like this moving westward out safely in the Atlantic, nearing Category 5 strength. This reminds me a lot of the way Isabel looked back in September of 2003. Here's another look at Hurricane Igor, and it definitely does appear that there is some weakening here on the southwest side. See, these reds here were more pronounced on that western side earlier on. You can see at the beginning of the loop it surrounded it perfectly. However, I mean, it's a technicality. If the winds come down to 140, then go back up to 155, then 130, then 150, it is going to be a Category 3, 4, possibly even 5 hurricane the next several days, and we're going to have to deal with it. But definitely a little bit of a southerly dip there with the hurricane, and that is not good news. Now, we do also have Tropical Storm Julia. As of 11 p.m., Julia was at 13.5 north, 23.5 west. This thing's still near the Cape Verde Islands, already moving west-northwest at 11,004 millibars. This is indicative of a storm that will not impact any land except the Cape Verde Islands, which is having its most direct impact right now with some gusty winds and some heavy surf and rainfall. It is expected to become a hurricane by Tuesday night, Category 1, and then stay at Category 1, and then as it moves around an upper level low, which could actually be providing a pretty good outflow jet for Hurricane Igor, by the way, this is actually going to end up moving west-northwest and then most likely back out to sea, like I said, one of those loopy tracks, this too, up to the north and then kind of hooking around. That seems likely with what will be Hurricane Julia as well, as we will continue to track that. Here's the latest satellite of Julia. You can see it left Africa. It's very well defined when it left Africa and has continued to show signs of strengthening, and right there at the end you can even see a good curved band, center sitting right in here, good outflow, pretty impressive. There's nothing that tells me that this isn't going to keep intensifying into another hurricane, and that would be the 5th hurricane of the 2010 season. Now, this is Invest 92L, okay, and we've been dealing with this the last few days since it was near the area of the Windward Islands and the Grenadines. Officially, the models initialize it here south of Haiti. It could be a little bit more of the north and west. Either way, they all move it west-northwest towards the Yucatan, and then over the Gulf, and then back west as some ridging pushes it in that general westward fashion. Now, a few things. First of all, if it's any further north, it could be a threat to the United States. Secondly, even if it isn't, storms that are strengthening and then bending west have a tendency to strengthen a lot. Case in point, Hurricane Igor. So what the thinking is here is that this could be nearing hurricane strength before the Yucatan based on the ship's model, but never make it there because then it interacts with the Yucatan, weakens, and doesn't have enough time to come back. And the consensus model is that this will go south of Jamaica, south of Cozumel, then come out and then generally bend west towards Tampico. But again, if it ends up developing further north, you take that track and you extend it north, and it is a lot longer over water here. Plus, these sea surface temperatures south of Cuba near the Cayman Islands are horrifically warm. And when I say horrific, I mean they could support a horrific hurricane in a very short amount of time, and that's why we're going to have to watch this so carefully. You can see the latest satellite imagery of the system. Definitely looking interesting. Again, they initialize it down here, but I'd be watching a little bit further north. Again, if it interacts with Jamaica, it could dance to the north or south of the island or go right over. Just some heavy rain, but it does have a little bit of an outflow pattern trying to develop here. It is spiking out, so I have trouble to think that this won't develop. And could this be Tropical Storm or even Hurricane Carl in a few days? Could be. Could be. You can see this little cloud shield here on the right side. That's the edge of Hurricane Igor as we continue to watch it, as really Igor has been the main player. You can see this is the Canadian model, which takes Igor to the north, but then jaunts it off west. And if we're dealing with Igor this far west, it would have to move north fast to avoid land in the Canadian Maritimes, New England, the East Coast, and Bermuda. There's Julia behind it, and there's our system 92L going into Texas. You can see the European model actually takes Igor to an astounding intensity you don't even want to know. Sub 920 millibars here north of Puerto Rico, well to the north and east of the Abaco Islands. There's Julia. There's enough ridging here to keep it pushing west for a while, but eventually it will break through to the north. It also shows our weak system with 92L over Mexico. Finally, the GFS has Igor making that little westward curve before turning out, like I said, and has Julia coming up. Doesn't show much of 92L, although you can track it here, developing quickly into a tropical storm or a hurricane before Mexico. So it doesn't do much until the Bay of Campeche, and as we saw with Tropical Storm Hermine, it could cause a lot of problems. On a personal note, I did want to mention that the heavy rains from Hermine actually took the life of a friend of mine who I knew. She passed away in the floodwaters from Hermine. So this is a small world when that happens. We live thousands of miles away, and something that I'm tracking, some measly tropical storm into Mexico, takes a friend's life. That is a very serious thing. So that goes to show it can happen to anybody. It could happen to Mike Naso. It could happen to you. So yeah, I'm up here in Ohio. Who would have ever thought I would have lost anybody with a hurricane that I know, you know? So it definitely is, you need to keep an eye on these things. I mean, you really do. I know it sounds, it's fun to track them and all that, but it could be serious. Now here's the upper level wind pattern. You can see Hurricane Igor has favorable wind shear throughout its next couple of days. 92L has favorable wind shear. Julia's in a bit more of a tough spot, but it should become a hurricane. Should have enough time to do that. And behind Julia, look at this. Could this be, if 92L becomes Carl, could this be Lisa? Who knows? We'll wait and see. I'm Mike Naso from IPR with the latest on dangerous, extremely dangerous Hurricane Igor. Stay tuned, I'll have more later.